Conservation Commission. First item on the agenda is other business, joint meeting with the Water Quality Management Committee, preliminary discussion on oyster demonstration project. Although I don't see I only see one member of the committee, but Ron, would you like to come up?
Thank you very much. Ron Zweig. I'm on the Water Quality Management Committee, and I'm basically the person who's going to be doing most of the coordinating work with the shellfish demonstration project as it progresses. I think that the important thing is that this program is one that's in very preliminary stages of design now, and that's why we're here this evening, is to discuss. I won't be showing slides myself.
What's that?
I won't be showing any slides.
Oh, okay.
It's the next presentation. That's
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, right. And yeah, basically, so this is one of several demonstration projects you're probably aware of. The shellfish inlet widening, which you've had a presentation on by John Ramsey a couple months ago, I think, by now. And the permeable reactive barrier component, road runoff controls of nitrogen and nutrients, and eco toilets, and also for the new fertilizer bylaw that has been developed to help control nitrogen and to work with the environment. And in 2011, at the Springtown meeting, there was an Article 17 that basically requested the blessing of town meeting to endorse these projects, which was then later the funding of about $2.8 million was then voted on in May of 2011 for this and these programs and other things with design. I think that that we are very much in a listening, basically learning and listening mode as far as different interest groups are concerned. We're working closely with DMF, the Division of Marine Fisheries, with the Department of Natural Resources here, with your committee, as well as the Harbor Master and others, and discussing, and the Coastal Pond Committee as well, and discussing this option in particular, the shellfish component. And one of the things the committee has done is to put out a request for proposals, a competitive process in which the Woodsville Group and Dr. Brawley will be speaking in a moment about specifics with regard to that. To put things in a little perspective, though, the plan, if the funding is available and things move forward as expected with regard to water quality management in that South Coast area, which includes Little Pond, Great Pond, Green Pond, Lawrence Pond, and Wacoit Bay, that are part of Wacoit Bay, that would basically, that work would be completed by 2040 as far as phase 1 and phase 2 is concerned. As far as Little Pond specifically is concerned, the present plan is that by 2020, if the sewering project, which is one that's gotten the most support at present, goes forward, it would be completed by 2020. At that time, however, the nitrogen removed through that would not meet the total maximum daily load of nitrogen for Little Pond. It would partially meet it. And therefore, after 2040, an area called the, I always have to look it up, the Conceptual Water Quality Compliance Area, which is north of that, which goes up to basically Coonamessett Pond. That area would also have to be addressed to meet the total maximum daily load for Little Pond and Great Pond as well. Lawrence Pond also would meet it with inlet widening possibly by 2040 if that did go forward. Green Pond, though, would meet the TMDL if everything was done south of 28 in terms of controlling septic nitrogen in that area. So what we're looking at then for Little Pond, where the plan now is to move ahead with a shellfish demonstration, is that pond would be sometime after 2040. It's hard to say when because of the nitrogen and nutrient load in the groundwater that would take time to migrate, even after you've addressed it north of 28. So with the shellfish component, if we go ahead with this, as we are progressing with it, there's a chance that that might offset at least that much nitrogen, so that the water quality, which is the main target of the whole thing, the water quality in that pond could be achieved to the level of the sentinel threshold of nitrogen loading in that pond, possibly before. But the demonstration project really is oriented at this point just to see how effective shellfish could be with maintaining water quality. There's good information from around the world that shows it does work and can help with this. And it might basically help advance, if it works out, if the demonstration project proves itself, it could very well show that the time required to achieving good water quality could be shortened for that pond, and therefore would help provide information to the town on how to move forward with it. So it really is a demonstration, a test. It's an application of possibilities of the many possibilities, but this one will likely and most definitely contribute, because if the oysters or quahogs or other shellfish grow, they take up nitrogen. It's part of the growth. And if they also help with denitrification in the pond, which has been scientific results showing that may also further advance it. So what we're really after, I think, with the demonstration, and John will be going into more detail in a moment, is to show at least put it in a scale that would give us some indication there would be an impact, a measurable impact from it if it's going to work based on the theory and the knowledge to date. So I think I'll stop there. I don't know if there's a question on that, but it's basically part of a comprehensive program addressing water quality in that part of town, in those particular estuaries, and specifically Little Pond.
Okay, thanks, Ron. And I think, after we hear John's presentation,
Fine.
people might have further questions.
Okay, thanks, Ellen.
Thanks.
Do I need to speak in the microphone?
Yes, you do, but the microphone can come to you.
Okay, because I think I can. The slides.
I think it,
Want me to sit over there and do that for you, or?
and do the slides.
Just want me to run back and forth.
I do want to mention, I believe, Mike, right?
Yes.
That Mike is recording this. I mean, everybody knows that we're on FCTV, so therefore we're recorded, but we do have to announce if anybody in the audience is recording.
Okay, well, this is a brief presentation. It's not long. If we can go back, yeah, Ron hit most of the points, and the purpose of this demonstration project in Little Pond is to demonstrate how much nitrogen could be removed. The two pathways for removing nitrogen would be actually to grow shellfish in the pond and then remove them at some point, and then you're actually physically taking it out. Shellfish typically have there are percentages of nitrogen that gets fixed in the tissue in the shell. And we can quantify that and predict how much nitrogen would come out over time. So the benefits, this is an old slide from a restoration presentation, but what happens when you increase the population of shellfish in these estuaries, they do a good job of clearing particles, which allow light to get to the benthos, to the bottom, and throughout the water column, and actually enhance primary productivity, which that process actually is what nitrogen fertilizes. And through that process, you can have enhanced dissolved oxygen, which is one of the desired effects of improving water quality. And we've talked about nutrient removal. Shellfish, whether it's aquaculture or reef restoration, create structure, and that has added benefits to these types of ecosystems. It's fish and crustaceans use it as habitat. So just a brief overview of that. You can go to the next slide. So, these are just conceptual ideas for you to take home with you. What I'm doing for the Water Quality Committee, what Woods Hole Group's doing is going through the literature, looking at site-specific studies here in the Cape, in Falmouth, and also in this region and getting the numbers we need to be able to predict, at least approximately, with some level of confidence, how much nitrogen could be removed based on the, per oyster. So how many oysters do they need to actually grow in a place like Little Pond to have a measurable effect? This is an example of right now what we're looking at. This is oysters. This is just through harvesting. This is this is number of millions on the bottom here on the x-axis, from basically 500,000 up to 10 million, and the kilograms of nitrogen you would remove just through harvesting. And the thing to remember is these curves. There's a big area of uncertainty here that spread out. These are the extremes. There's a high range and a low value in the range. So somewhere in that range is what we think just through harvesting would be removed. Now, a little bit more about this is that it depends on what size the oysters are, or what other shellfish are when you put them in. If they're very small, you don't really have a measurable effect perhaps until the end of the growing season when they get larger. If you start with a larger size class, you have a much greater impact. And we can go to the next one. These numbers don't mean anything to you unless you put them into context. On the y-axis here is the percent of the nitrogen load to Little Pond during the growing season. So what we're doing is basically a very simple Excel model with all the information that we have, looking at just through harvest, what percent of the nitrogen through that period, basically May through October, that's being loaded continually through groundwater and surface water, could be removed through oyster culture. And as you see, 2 to 4 million oysters could, just through harvest, 5 to 10% of that load could be removed. That's assuming they all live and behave the way they're supposed to. But as Ron described a little bit, the process of ingestion and metabolizing food, shellfish actually can enhance denitrification, which is a microbial process, which is happening already in these estuaries, but they're actually coupling the amount of organic matter in the water column to the benthos, which is the bottom. And just by the nature of the way they process food and create biodeposits, they can enhance rates of nitrogen loss through these microbial processes called denitrification and also burial, which is basically nitrogen that's not reactive biologically. So I don't have graphs here, but when we crunch the numbers and look at what we think when we add the amount of nitrogen removed through harvest, denitrification, and burial, and we're looking at between 500,000 and 2 million oysters, which is what the committee wanted to look at, really focus on in terms of the scale of what would be farmed there, or grown, I should say. Up to 5 to 20% of the nitrogen that's loaded from May through October could be removed. The denitrification burial is variable, it's site-specific, so that's what the demonstration project, one of the things it's really trying to do is monitor. We have a monitoring program associated with this that will try to quantify, or will quantify, the amount that's actually removed. Are there any questions on any of that right now? Betsy?
I have a whole page of questions.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll go through, I just have pictures here to give you an idea of what things look like. This is 1 million oysters when you get them from a hatchery. These are from Musconga's hatchery in Maine. They're in 2 pouches of 500,000 each, and that's how much volume 1 million oysters is when we get them at about 1.5 million from a hatchery. I should mention I also grow oysters in Duxbury. I have a farm. So some of these pictures are from me and my colleagues up in Duxbury. Typically what happens, the process is you get hatchery oysters, which go into what are called upwelling systems. The town has a series of upwellers. This is what they look like. They look like sawdust or little grains of pepper or something like that. And they're kept in these containers for about 2 months until they grow to a size about this size, about 1/4 inch. We call them quarters. They're graded out when it's a commercial operation to uniform size, and then put into a series of what we call nursery phases. This is, some of you may be familiar with these. These are just basically rack and bag systems. So those oysters that he was holding in his hand would be placed about 1,000 in each one of these flat bags up there. They're closures on both sides. They're basically envelopes with a mesh size of about 3/16 of an inch. Initially, they're put in those, slid into these shelves and secured. And basically, they sit flat. They could either sit flat on the bottom like that. This is a low tide picture. This is about 100 racks, which would be just over 500,000 seed oysters at that size. And this is about an eighth, not even an eighth of an acre, and with plenty of space between. Those are on the bottom, and I don't have any pictures today of what other methods to grow them in that type of system. You can actually put flotation on those racks and have them strung on the surface. So in a place like Little Pond, for example, where the substrate is very soupy, it might be too deep to be able to grow oysters on the bottom like that, and they might sink in, you can actually float them. And here's an example of just floating bags. These are lines of bags, 2 that are tethered to floats, basically 2 sets of 2, a line. Each line is about 100 bags. There could be about 1,000 oysters in each bag. So by these guys here, they're pulling a line out and attaching it to the other side. This would be the approximate footprint of about 500,000 small oysters, those 1/4-inch size oysters, in the beginning of the growing season. And if you have oysters that are closer to an inch, and you're starting in the spring from the previous year, you basically have to cut those volumes, those numbers in half in the volume. So you'd have about half as many, 250,000 in that type of footprint there. Now, if you're growing them on the surface or on the bottom, at some point you have to take them out. I just wanted to show you, demonstrate, this is a float in Duxbury Bay where the bags are taken out. They're emptied out into these totes or whatever you want to put them in, and then and relayed somewhere else. And this is about the size of oysters in Duxbury anyway, toward the end of the first growing season. This is late August. They're about 2 inches, 1.5 to 2 inches in size. So they went from those little bags, that million in those 2 pouches, would then fill swimming pools at this point. That's how fast they grow. Here's some pictures from Mashpee in their program there. I think is it Rick York up here on the upper right? They have these trays that are just basically lobster pot wire that are elevated slightly off the bottom on the edge of the estuary where it's firmer and shallow. And they just have oysters sitting out in these trays. At high tide, they're in the water. They're doing their thing. And at low tide, they're exposed. And it looks like they can move them around a bit. So this is one option as well for growing out. Once they're out of bags, they can also be put in smaller, more mobile, transportable kind of containers along the edge of the shoreline or in estuaries where there's a firm area, and they can be subtidal as well. Or they could be relayed and dumped out on the bottom with a shovel or just out of those totes and just scattered. This is how we grow oysters in Duxbury primarily. They come out of the bags and they're put on the bottom and then taken up later, about a year later. So I just wanted to show give you an idea of what's involved with the types of gear and the different types of methods that the town could choose. Yes?
Okay, so you mentioned that
Yep, thank you very much, Jim.
you could have 5 to 20% removal with, I think, 2 to 4 million oysters, removing those oysters once they get to market size and whatever denitrification process they accelerated.
Right, that 5% if you start with a small first-year seed. The upwards of 18 to 20% is if you start with like a 1/2 inch to a 1 inch oyster.
Okay,
So it depends on the initial size.
okay, well, presumably, you're thinking of starting with small ones and growing them out,
Right.
aren't you?
Yeah, there are options. You can overlap a year.
Right, right. Okay, what percent of the pond, let's assume that we needed to have floating docks,
Right.
floating areas, and
we had later in the season, so they were large, so we needed fewer per bag. What percent of the pond would be covered with these bags?
Right, well, there's some considerations there, and Ron and I have gone through those numbers, and, I mean, there are a couple of things. If they're spaced close together, you have a smaller footprint for people to look at, and they're contained in a small area, and you can work those. The town may also want to spread them out because they'll have more space, less of an effect, perhaps right below the system. When you have too much density, you can have localized effects that may or may not be desirable.
Well, this isn't, as you well know, isn't an area that's well flushed.
That's
even
right.
if you open it a little bit.
So it has to be optimized.
It's not like Duxbury Bay.
No. And there's a lot of food in this system, too. But it's not well flushed, but in order to maximize growth and minimize too high density, and the oysters may not like being too dense with low oxygen conditions. They can be spread out, which would increase the footprint. So we're working on trying to determine a series of scenarios or.
So you're not going to give me a number for footprint right now?
Well, I think, yeah, I've done some, and Ron might want to jump in on this, but if you have them fairly tight, workable, which may work perfectly fine in this system, I think it's under an acre of area for 2 million oysters.
And how big is?
The whole pond is 45.
45?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks. I've done some calculations on what would be required, basically, if we did the whole, we're able to achieve, if it worked, we're able to achieve the total maximum, the sentinel threshold, the nitrogen level that's the target based on the Massachusetts Estuary Project analyses. And that would be about 15 acres. So that would be about 30% of the pond, roughly, would be in aquaculture. That would, if we ever went that far, I can't imagine doing that much at that point.
And
but
have
let's
you done, excuse me, let me just ask, have you done the calculations as to what would happen at night? What would happen as far as DO with that density of oysters in there?
Yeah, the DO would be higher because it's removed. About 90, let's say 95% of the oxygen consumed in these ponds is by microbial life, even under culture conditions. So that if the oysters are compacting and removing that from the water column, the oxygen level should be higher. It will actually improve the levels because it's a microbial life that's spread through the plankton that's consuming oxygen at night in particular.
Well, the oysters are going to be consuming
But
it.
they will too, right, but not to the degree. It's a very small percentage that those animals would actually be taking up compared to the microbial life. From many studies of this have been done under aquaculture conditions that have shown that.
So but you're not proposing, I think it's important for people to understand what the visual impact of this will be.
Right.
As well, and you're not proposing
No, I'm just
30
saying.
acres, you're saying,
No, 30%. It would be about 15 acres what we're for the demonstration, we don't know what scale it will be, but it may be 3 acres, basically, maybe, or less, depending on how we do it. This is something that's still being designed. But the point is that it needs to be of a scale with the number of animals that within a couple of years, we can see an impact on the water quality. If it's really, we did this summer a viability test in Little Pond and in Green Pond, see how they did. And almost 100% of the oysters survived in those tests over the summer. And those were just a few bags, 3 bags in each pond put out, basically. It was very, very small. But, so they live, and they do okay. And they actually lived, they were put in just before that fish kill event in Little Pond. And still we got almost 100% survival in there. So they can withstand even those low oxygen conditions. So I think that we'll see what comes from the planning and looking at this and doing the analysis, but it's looking quite good. Actually, Brian Howes was saying that the impact of shellfish aquaculture could be 5 times greater than what goes into the oyster itself, which means it'd be roughly, in terms of the need, and a lot of that's from denitrification. And that would mean that the area could even be 1/3 or of what we envision, basically. But 4 acres may actually do the job if his theoretical view is correct. So I would say that, John's working on the design of this and trying to factor in these elements. But I think your question too about, and what he elaborated on about size and looking at sequencing and how all of this would work, it would probably take a couple of years of an oyster being in the pond before it would reach a size to be seeded elsewhere or something. We have other issues with regard to the fact that shell fishing is prohibited in the pond, and therefore we need to depurate the animals if they're going to be consumed afterwards. We have to depurate them, which means that they have to be put in clean water for according to state guidelines for 6 months to clean themselves out of those, say, coliform bacteria and other bacteria. So this is another thing to work out down the line and how all of this is going to work. But the idea is to keep it as small as possible. And as I say, if it does, as John's saying, if we aim for 20% of the nitrogen load, excess load that's going in, that may advance the water quality improvement while these other things like this sewer plant or something comes up. Online. And therefore, we're not talking about 2040 or 2050, because until that time, these ponds will still be loaded excessively on top of what they already are. So the notion is try to get in and advance things as fast as possible to bring them back to a good condition. And again, there are other, as you point out, there's the viewscape. There's a way, how much is going to be out there? What's it going to look like? Is it going to be submerged, floating? If it's submerged, you won't know it's there, basically. But if some of it is floating, then that would be something that the neighbors, we've already talked to neighbors that, we're starting to engage the neighborhood. There's navigation. Of course, in Little Pond, there are no moorings. That's not an issue in Little Pond. But there is kayaking. There are different things that go on in there, and there's swimming, and at certain times, I think. Not seeing much swimming there, but there are these other factors. But we have to consider the full dimension, because it would be something new in these estuaries.
Okay, the only other thing, and I realize that this is sort of ongoing, but the only other thing I just want to mention that I think you should be thinking about in your monitoring program is to also monitor the other shellfish in the pond. There are shellfish in the pond now, and I know one of the concerns is what happens to those other shellfish. If you have stuff right on the bottom, those shellfish aren't going to make it. I mean, that's one of the reasons why DMF is not allowed farms in areas where there's shellfish growing. But even if they're up above, potentially with pseudofeces adding to whatever is on the bottom, that could be impacting. So I think there should be some program. I mean, we say we want to improve the water quality, but what's our goal? What do we want to improve the water quality for? For people, for native shellfish and fish, for people to swim, for people to boat?
I think, all those things, basically. Plus, is in terms of biodiversity, improvement in the biodiversity in the pond, so that, as John mentioned, the transparency improves. Eelgrass has disappeared through a lot of it, or most of it, and therefore there may be a chance with this greater transparency to get those habitats back, which is good for winter flounder, for scallop breeding, and other things to go on in different sections. So there would be.
I think we're going to have to improve the substrate.
Right. Yeah.
Also for the eelgrass to come back.
Yeah, right. Yeah, sure.
We just conducted a stock assessment of Little Pond where we took samples, benthic samples, throughout the entire area, 136, along the shoreline and in the center portions. Okay. And we basically created and I can bring this next time we come here, a map showing you that there is an existing suitable habitat that's mainly around the fringes of the pond, in the firmer sand. Once you go out about 50 feet from the shore, it's black mayonnaise, and there's a lot of organic matter piled on top of it. And we didn't find any live shellfish seaward of 50 feet of mean low water. And the ones that we did find, we did some math. We came up with a number, an estimate of they're all cohogs. No other species were found, although there were shells, some other
Because they
species.
can clam up, they can deal with that.
Yeah, right. Right, and so the soft shell clams and scallops can't live through anoxic, low oxygen conditions as well. So we
Good, so
have an idea.
you are doing that, you have a baseline?
We've already done that, and
Okay, good.
I've given Ron a draft report of the stock assessment there, which was performed about a month ago.
Okay. I guess my one other quick thing is for your monitoring, what parameters are you going to monitor?
Yeah, well, Brian House has a proposal in with the town with a monitoring plan, and that would be consistent with the monitoring that's been conducted historically in all of Falmouth estuaries. So it will be, nutrients, chlorophyll, dissolved oxygen, Secchi depth,
Salinity, temperature.
yeah, all
right.
the usual suspects. And
Nitrogen.
and I think they're proposing every 3 years a benthic biodiversity sampling event to look at the
Okay, so have a
animals
time series.
living in the benthos, the worms and such, and shellfish.
Whether it's a green plus or a red plus.
Right. So we're actually working with SMAST and with the committee to optimize the plan to actually quantify the confidence. How much of this can we detect in terms of change in the future? How many samples are required, and to what percent can we actually change in nitrogen concentration or chlorophyll or light?
Can you attribute to
Can we actually, yeah.
that?
And so that we may have reference sites that we'll be using to, Great Pond, Green Pond, for example, to compare along the demonstration project in parallel. Those are recommendations we're coming up with anyway.
Okay. Let me see if I think Ed looks like, you have some questions? You usually have some questions?
Well, I certainly had an awful lot of questions related to this whole project, but I'm not going to ask them now. I am interested, though, in seeing this report of this assessment. You called a stock assessment that you recently did. If that could be made available, let's say, online somewhere, and you can just forward the address where we can address the data. I'm very interested in that. Because this issue of, I hear it coming up repeatedly, issue of what currently exists there. From one end, some people saying nothing is living there other than stuff that might have been seeded. And I guess from what we've seen in a lot of projects that come before us is it's pretty much the cohogs are surviving around the perimeter. And the 50-foot measurement you mentioned is, I guess, a little bit farther than what we're used to seeing. I would have guessed it'd be more like 10 or 15 feet
Yeah,
from shore.
that 50 feet's basically the furthest away that we were finding shellfish. Most of it is within that.
Right, I'm just guessing that you didn't find too many out at 50 feet,
No.
because they're pretty much closer to shore. That's the experience
Yeah,
that,
there's this little shelf, it's kind of like, it drops a couple of feet and it gets very, all of a sudden you're up to your knee in mud.
and that turns to oily muck, whatever,
Yeah.
that's what I call it.
Yeah.
But I'd be interested in seeing the results of that.
Yeah, it's a draft now, we're going to revise it in the next week or so. Be in your hands.
Okay, Tommy? Thanks, Ed.
Yes. If you were to do the 3 acres, how much maintenance and human activity and equipment is involved in just maintaining them through the life cycle?
Well, it depends on the type of grow-out method.
Right.
So it's most likely would be some kind of, not a floating bag, but their oyster grow systems are basically floating racks, or a
Right.
couple bags deep. They need to be, well, there are different maintenance levels of effort. If you're commercial, you're putting a little more work into it, but if you're maintaining the oysters just to keep them alive, if there's fouling, it's about every 2 weeks to 4 weeks. If fouling's getting heavy, they'd have to be turned over and dried out and then turned over again within a long day or the next day. So probably, and shaking them around and kind of cleaning off any fouling and maintaining. So it's, if you could go through all of the nursery gear once every week or two, that would be kind of the schedule.
And that's about a day, a group of people?
Yeah.
In a day or two?
Yeah.
And what if
Yeah.
a storm was to come and everything was to get loose? Is that going to be an issue? If the bags break open and now those oysters that were contained are now everywhere, what happens then?
Yeah, it's unlikely that the bags would break open.
Okay.
It's more likely the damage would be limited to things breaking free from a line or a line drifting.
And they'd still be contained in their bags and
Yeah.
crates?
Yeah, we find them on the shoreline after huge storms, and
Yeah.
the bags,
Still good.
really don't rip open.
And is the plan eventually to harvest and sell them?
Do you want to take this one?
Or is that, that's true, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
If we can sell them to New York?
Well, this is, from Little Pond, there would not be direct sales. But
Okay.
it might be very well that we would, in the other ponds during the closed season, at the beginning of the closed season, we may be putting them in there for harvest or for further depurating until it's open, which means then, like the 6 months that these ponds may be closed. Then they might be sold that way. There may be, and we'd be looking at the economics of this, it might be something that we would just take them and put them out in Vineyard Sound, outside of normal capture. I mean, we don't know what we're going to be doing with them, but just, because there's talk now, particularly in the New York area, after Sandy, of creating these oyster reefs along the shore that then become like helping with wave control and that kind of thing. But it just depends. I mean, there are other issues with that as well. But whether they're actually consumed Little Pond is closed.
Right.
But the other ponds, even West Falmouth Harbor, I mean, the best oysters in town, I think, come from West Falmouth Harbor. But it's heavily impaired. But there are parts of it that are really, really, really good. So it just depends on how it evolves. But there is this depuration or this cleaning part that must be done ahead of time. So it's
Thank you.
So just a quick comment for those of you who haven't read Kurlansky's book on the oyster and the whole history of oysters around New York City. It's very relevant now after Sandy,
yeah.
I think. Mike?
When do you see this starting?
Well, that depends on it. We're going through the process. I'm glad you asked that question. That we would like to see it starting this spring, according to the plan, and we would like to come back to you in January next month, if you can fit into your program, with a proposal for consideration for this for starting in the spring. Let's say April, May. Time frame. It's pretty short, basically. But for us to catch this season, it's farming, so it's sort of we have to be there in the spring, basically, to get started for this year, or we almost have to wait a year. And we could probably start a bit later, but it just depends. The sooner in April, May, I think is the time that's the best time to.
So if we're optimistic, and I like being optimistic,
Okay.
You could have indications by as early as 2016?
We could have an indication by the end of 2014. Because if we get them in this year, when we talk about years, we're talking about growing seasons, basically. So if we can take advantage of this growing season, by the end of the 2 years from now, we could see an impact we should see an impact. If the oysters are retained in them, or we start, it depends if, on the budget, but, the seed, the bigger it is, the more expensive. So if we were to put bigger ones in this year, even by fall, we might even see something, depending on the scale.
How much variability is there from year to year? I mean, is there a great season for oysters and a bad season for oysters, like there are
I think
so many things?
I think I'll let John answer this, but what he mentions is reference points, what could be called control points. Let's say next summer, this summer was a dry summer. Next summer, we have a really wet summer. and we got our baseline data, and there's a lot of flushing just from the rain coming
Right.
out. We'll be monitoring adjacent ponds so we can get an idea of how things are going from year to year. But oysters are like little filtering machines. You know, they will do what they do. It's variable in temperature more than anything else. But John might be able to talk about variability from year to year in terms of production.
Well, outside of disease events, which can actually turn the whole thing, over. If you have MSX or dermo, you can lose 90% of your oysters in 1 month. But they're disease-resistant oysters, and that's what the town would most likely do. Really great years are usually years with a warm winter, where the oysters didn't really stop growing in the wintertime. And we've seen larger ones faster in the next fall and summer. So it's temperature dependent for the most part. So there are good years and bad.
Okay.
The bad ones are typically due to storms, disease, predation.
I'm basically an engineer, and I like a controlled environment as best you can, which says if we could get this done before the sewering, before anything else goes on, then you have one less variable than you have if you start impacting the pond in other ways. So from my perspective, the sooner the better.
Questions?
I'm just fascinated that the more I learn about an oyster, the more it sounds like the Bear Aspen of the ocean. It's intriguing to know that the impact of this could be very significant. And that's it. That's all I get for
But just like aspirin, you wouldn't take it if you had a ulcer.
that is true.
That's true.
Yes,
No questions.
Court.
One of your earlier graphs, I think shows, and I think I recall it right, maybe it's like the second graph that shows something that has 10 million oysters, and that this would result in potentially 70% of the removal of nitrogen. Am I reading that graph correctly?
At the high
Yes.
end.
Okay, so, you said, I think somewhere along the line, Betsy asked you how much area that would take up, and you said potentially, if you were to do that, 30 acres, is that correct?
Well, we were down at the 2 to 3.
Okay, so
Million.
the 10 million to get our 70%, how many acres would that require? And translating that, what percentage of Green Pond would thus have to be devoted to oyster growing?
This is Little Pond.
Little Pond.
And if we were to do it, we would be growing it in people's back lawns. Because he said 3 acres for
Yeah.
2 to 3%,
Yeah, I can't provide a.
2 to 3 million.
No, you know what I'm
Direct
getting at.
answer.
I'm trying to get, and I don't want you to construe my questions to be that I have a negative feeling about this, because I think this is very positive. Okay, I'm just trying to get my head around, to have a measurable impact, what percentage of the pond is going to be occupied by oyster cultivation?
It's a different method that I use, but in those rack systems that I showed you, which are about the same footprint as a floating rack system, and about the same number of oysters per. I have a 1/4 acre nursery area, and it's only 1/3 filled with racks, and I can grow 1.5 to 2 million in those racks a year, just for the first year. So if you do the math, it's only a few acres that really, with that kind of density, to support 10 million. But floating systems may require a little more space for maneuverability, for access. So it probably more, around 3 to 5, perhaps, for 10 million. And it depends. If they're going to be larger oysters, up to 2 or 3 inches, the number of oysters per growing unit has to be cut down substantially. 300 oysters per bag instead of 1,000. That increases the footprint.
Are you gonna let any of these oysters get to the point where they go through their sex change and then start producing seed, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that they would spawn if they're there long enough.
They do in Wellfleet, we have a little film, actually, I didn't bring it tonight, but you can see them spawning in the bags, basically. They're just, the Barnstable County Extension Service had made this, happened to be there at the moment, and they were spawning, and therefore reseeding Wacoit Bay with oysters from the aquaculture. So it is feasible. Also, in terms of the benefits, another little, maybe it's small, but it could be significant, is that the shell growth actually sequesters carbon dioxide. So it helps with the CO2 in the atmosphere and everything, because it actually gets fixed in the shell, and that can be
Of course, the opposite's
removed.
also true. The ocean is becoming acidified.
acidic,
as
right.
well as our coastal ponds.
Yeah.
There's some Hui people that are doing some work at waters coming into the estuaries.
Right, but actually this summer we had probably about as bad conditions in Little Pond as you could have in terms of respiration going on in there because of the low oxygen, so I assume pH was also quite low, and yet still they seem to be, they grew.
The oysters made it, yeah.
The oysters grew, yeah.
So a couple of summary comments. One is, if you'd like to come to us in January with a proposal, please visit Jen and go over
Okay,
what we would have to see.
okay.
And the second, my second comment is, I know, Ron, that you're not on these subcommittees, but you mentioned the permeable reactive barrier and the stormwater runoff
Yeah.
as other things people are looking at, and those are both issues that this board also looks at. And I guess I'm going to charge you to bring it back to the whole committee and say that, before any final plan is put together, we would like to see an intermediate
Okay.
report on those.
Okay, great, okay. Yeah, well, I'm sure that's part of the process. I think that most of the PRB work, the permeable reactive barrier work, is going to be design work for a while still. They're not on the same schedule as this. And the runoff, there are analyses being done, particularly for the Little Pond watershed to start with, and to understand where it's going, and where that water's going, how much to Falmouth Harbor, how much to Little Pond, and where interventions might work out for that. So,
Okay.
but definitely, I think that like with the inlet widening, we came in,
Right.
John Ramsey came in, so I think that will be definitely periodically coming. So,
Good.
but thank you.
Let me go down the board one more time. If there are any further questions? No? Not?
Well, yes.
Yes.
Maybe one. You might, a question. Where are the oysters now that you were growing last fall? Are they back in the water, or are they in a cooler somewhere on shore?
The agreement was to destroy them at the end of it, because they were in Little Pond. Green Pond could have probably continued, but that was the agreement with the Division of Marine Fisheries, and so they were destroyed at the end of the trial.
Is this somebody's shell driveway now?
Well, I think they went actually to the landfill, but I'm not sure exactly where they ended up. But they were, that was the agreement. So it was basically.
Okay. Let me open it to questions from the audience. Mike? Yeah.
My name is Michael McGrath. I've done an awful lot of work on the movement of nitrogen through the environment. A long time ago, when the town rebuilt the town bulkheads on Falmouth in the harbor back in 1989, I witnessed a surge plume from a cesspool. It was the town's own cesspool, and it had gone over 80 feet. It was still raw wastewater. It smelled like raw wastewater. That was fixed by connecting the marina building to the town sewer. I have made casual observations that is really speculative in a way, but I know where there are some cesspools that are in the water, and there seems to be where, in close proximity where I would think that plume would come out, there's a particular green algae. So I would hope that maybe when they're putting the oysters in, maybe we could examine the shore of Little Pond, and perhaps we could find where some of the fecal coliforms are coming in, and most likely they're coming in from cesspools installed in the water. That was a common technique, and if you think about Little Pond, there are ancient houses on both sides. By a common technique, it was standard practice in the 40s, 50s, and 60s to put a cesspool in. It never clogged if you put it into the groundwater.
Yeah, because it flushed it.
Yeah, but the plume is, as far as what I saw, it was 2 basketballs high. It was about it might have been as wide as this. It had gone 80 feet, it still reeked. So there was movement of carbon and fecal coliforms. And I wish somebody would do some research. I could show them some of these plumes or places where there's green algae of a particular type. And if there was indeed a connection between that and fecal coliforms, we might be able to clean up the pond. So if they're doing the work there, maybe they might see if there's any of these green algae places. They're pretty discernible. As someone that tries to remove nitrogen from the environment, you ought to encourage them as much as possible. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks, John and Ron. Next is request for a continuance under determination of applicability, Seascape Association, Inc., care of Henry Leeds, Waterside Drive, map 0402A105 000A, North Falmouth, for permission to preserve the vista, to control invasive vines and shrubs, install native shrubs where gaps are created from invasive plant removal, and to permit the existing composite boardwalk. Jen?
Madam Chairman, the applicant is requesting continuance until December 19th.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any questions on the board? Any questions from the audience? Okay, motion on the table is a continuance to December 19th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Minutes, vote 11/28/2012. I read those. You did too.
I read them, and I'm comfortable with them.
Yep, me too.
So I'll move to have them accepted.
Could we have a second?
Second.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Unanimous, so moved. Minutes of 12/5/2012. I wasn't here, so.
I have not
Michelle,
seen
you
them.
weren't here either. You
I have
didn't
not
see
seen
them.
So you can do those next week.
Okay, we'll do them next week.
Actually, I read them over. I just had one question in page 3, I think it is, in the middle. And I'm not sure what I don't believe this is what I said under the discuss vote conservation restrictions, at the very last sentence. I'm trying to recall exactly what it was I said, but I don't believe this is correct. So, but other than that, I have no issue.
Well, why don't you think about what you said and put it down and then give it to Jen, and Jen can correct.
Okay.
And then we can vote. You want to wait till next week, or?
Sure. I'll
Okay.
move that we accept the minutes with possible change there on that one item.
All right. You want a second?
Sure.
Any comments? Ed?
Yes, actually, I'm a little bit reluctant to move ahead on this. I might prefer to go till next week.
Well, let's-
I had a chance to just scan a little bit, and on page 3, one reason Courtney might be a little confused, I think there are some statements there attributed to Courtney, which were very definitely the statements that I had made in the meeting. So I think we need to take some time to go over it a little more thoroughly.
All right.
I wouldn't want to put him on the spot for the
Yeah.
comments that I happen to make.
Well,
Okay,
I think that's why I was looking
Courtney?
at this, because I don't think I've.
Courtney,
You didn't
withdraw
make
your,
those comments I did, right?
Withdraw your motion.
withdraw your second.
I withdraw my second.
Withdraw your first, Courtney.
I withdraw my first.
Okay, we'll do those next week. Okay, next is request for determination of applicability, but there's only one, and we've just continued it, so we're going to move right on to request for hearings under a notice of intent for permission to remove, fill, dredge, build upon, degrade, and/or otherwise alter an area subject to protection. All hearings of the Falmouth Conservation Commission are heard simultaneously under the authority of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. First is Elizabeth and Michael Nemetz, 46 School Street, Woods Hole, for permission to construct and maintain a detached two-car garage, install dry wells, native mitigation plantings, relocate and plant trees, connect to town sewer, utilities, reconfigure the parking, remove a portion of the stone wall, maintain the existing irrigation system and the associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping. Jen? Oh, you're going to
I'm gonna
recuse yourself. Did you get that? Tom's recused himself. Jen?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I'll state many of my comments until after Mr. McGrath's presentation.
Good evening again, Mike.
Good evening. My name is Michael McGrath. I work for Holmes and McGrath. We're civil engineers and land surveyors, and we prepared the plan that's been filed accompanying the notice of intent. This is, of course, the first thing I forget is the house number. I believe it's on School Street. It's 46 School Street. This has actually been before the commission 5 times before. There were two orders issued in 2003 for they tore down the building, built a new one, they renovated this. Then there was a determination of applicability about some plantings that had to be replaced. And then there was a 2008 order that talked about reconfiguring the pier ramp and float. There are, as far as the wetland resources, this is the old pond. There's a salt marsh all along the base of the land at the edge of Eel Pond. Then there's a coastal bank. The primary coastal bank is shown in here. There's some additional coastal banks that are man-made against retaining walls and things like that that meet the required slopes. There is in the Falmouth Wetlands Regulation a series of conditions or standards that relate to redevelopment of developed land near resources. And they generally talk about there being a Falmouth Wetlands Resource Buffer Zones A and B. Here, this whole site is entirely, almost entirely in an A zone, which is 100 feet from the salt marsh. So there's this is the boundary of the A. So almost the entire site is within your resource area buffer A. There's also what I forgot to describe, there's a flood zone that comes very close and crosses a portion of the site. It's the area above elevation 11. So the proposal is to construct a two-car garage here. When if you go to the site, there are granite parking pavers where you would put the wheels on granite blocks. We're going to remove those and actually construct a garage in this location with the same type of granite paving blocks. If you go onto the site, there's a retaining wall here that comes across, so this actually will be installed and filled. In order to have or to propose this, we have to meet the requirements under 10.18. So what we're showing is that there's a diagram that's accompanying the notice of intent that talks that we're going to remove a 19 square feet of retaining wall. We're going to build 576 square feet of garage. We're going to remove granite blocks of 202 square feet and add 134 square feet. So the net is there's 489 square feet additional impervious area. under your regulations, we have to provide mitigation plantings that are in excess of 3 times that. So what we've done is we have provided the required mitigation plantings is this green area here, this green area here, some green area here, and green area here. In every case, it touches and enhances an existing buffer that either existed naturally or was a buffer that was required by one of the previous permits. You also have minimum setbacks under the 1018, and we meet every one of the minimum setbacks. I guess it would be, we're more than the minimum setback from the salt marsh. The minimum setback's 25, and I think we're 30, over 30. So I believe that this meets your regulations that are, as far as redevelopment. What has come to our attention today is that the lady at the Board of Appeals thinks we need a special permit. So you are entitled by law to a copy of any application. And since I didn't think we needed one, but there's now a question, I'm going to ask for continuance to the first Wednesday in February in order that we apply to the Board of Appeals. It turns out that I also should have applied to the historic districts. So you're entitled to see those applications, and so there'll be, but I had hoped to answer any questions concerning conformance with your regulations, which I think we do conform.
Okay, Mike, we had another hearing on this also. There was a pool that was proposed at one point, and I'm going to request that we put all former applications on this 46 School Street into the record for this one.
Madam Chairman, do you want all 5 of them or just the full one?
All 5.
I think all 5.
The pool was denied in 2006 under a different set of regulations, and that was eventually withdrawn. So, yep, you're free to put it in, but in 2006...
Thanks, Mike.
We applied, we asked for a variance, and it was denied. So we eventually withdrew. So,
Mike, do you have any on the side?
there's all... Yes.
How much?
I haven't calculated.
Can you do that for our February hearing?
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. It'll be minimal. There's always fill required.
No, I understand, I didn't know how much, and I know the site, and I couldn't really visualize it, so if you could just provide that, that would be great.
Sure.
I would appreciate it, thank you. And on your mitigation planting, Mike, under where that first little arrow, next to the, like your northern property,
In
you
here?
have your mitigation plantings over existing vegetation. There, are you going to throw those out? The way ours is drawn, it looks like you're using that area.
Well, they planted some flowers that aren't on your list, so we're
Yeah.
going to take the flowers out.
So, yeah, we talked about that
Yes.
at the sale, okay.
Yes, so we are going to take out
Okay, I just
Lawn
wanted to
and-
clarify that that was that area.
the flowers. Flowers ought to be on your list. We also
Let's just move on.
are showing 2 new trees, and there's a tree that's underneath the proposed, and we're moving it over. We're transplanting it.
Okay, and when you said the reconfiguration, are you getting rid of those existing granite parking blocks to,
What's going to be where you're removing the parking?
yeah,
Lawn.
so you're gonna remove all those parking blocks and just have the ones in front of the driveway? I mean,
Yes.
in front of the
Just going to
garage.
turn them sideways.
I think there's going to be excess.
So you're just gonna remove
But
them?
not very much.
Okay, thank you.
Courtney?
Stanley already answered my question about the fill. The other question I have, which would be very helpful for the next meeting, is to provide us with some elevations of the proposed garage, along with cross-sections that would show existing grade, the elevation of the top of the foundation, and the elevation of the garage slab.
So they have to
that-
put a 4-foot frost wall in for something like this?
So that you can clearly see, because where you're gonna be putting most of your fill, I would judge, is in the hole where you put the frost wall. Is that correct?
That's right.
But you're not planning to put fill around the outside to hide the foundation, is that?
That's right, this is gonna stick up out of the ground,
Yeah.
3 or 4
I mean,
feet.
Obviously, if you don't like to show concrete, you can always bring shingles down over the concrete and hide it that way, rather than bringing fill to bring it
Or
up.
they could plant bushes.
Or stone.
But we don't know yet what's being proposed. That's what you're asking for,
Well,
right?
that's why I'm asking for
You're
the
making
plan.
presumptions. Okay.
Yeah, I want to see the plan, I want to see a cross-section. Other than that, I have no questions.
You have no further question.
Further questions?
Michelle?
No questions, seems pretty straightforward.
Mike?
It's that northeast corner, I couldn't visualize what you were doing, so we're gonna hear that, so I'm okay. Yeah,
We're going to get more information.
yeah, that's it, I'm happy. That was the question I had, Mike, you got it.
Ed?
Yes, there's some information I need that's not available to us now, including all of the prior records will be certainly helpful. But Mr. McGrath, I think I need to ask you to get a little bit more work. What I need to ask for is a plan which shows current conditions without the proposed garage, without the mitigation. Reason I ask is because just looking at what's in front of us, the existing coastal bank where the garage is proposed, it's very hard on this plan to see and understand what is actually there. And I think some of the details that Mr. Byrd asked for would also be helpful. But again, I need to see a plan of existing conditions. But my first realization that we needed, that is when I went to the site, and I'm seeing you're proposing mitigation, and I'm looking at the site, and I'm saying, well, this is already vegetated. And to revegetate an existing vegetated area isn't quite something the way we're prone to accept. And I really, I can't see it because I don't have the existing conditions before me. I think that would be very helpful, and it might require that you're going to have to remove some of that planned mitigation, and there's probably a lot of area where you can do it, actually on the southern side of the property where I have no issue with what you have here. But I'm also remembering a lot of that vegetated area. I could be wrong, but we have had 5, as you said, previous projects on this site. And I'm remembering a lot of that as plantings that were put in the ground in satisfaction for the mitigation required by some of the previous work. So we need to clear all of that up, and again, a plan of existing conditions would help considerably. I remember it a lot because I remember going back after the fact and saying, oh my God, I think they did a really nice job here. And when I was at the site earlier today, yeah, it looks very nice, the work that was done. Some of it might have even been done in response to an enforcement order. I'm not sure of that, but again, the history of this project, the entire history of this project, of this particular site, would be very helpful.
Could I speak to that?
Yeah.
You required an as-built when the certificate of compliance was issued, and so you have an as-built. What's happened is they've gone around and planted flowers and things. So, to me, the mitigation you accepted before is the line of mitigation that was accepted before. I should be able to add to it even if they've planted something.
Well, I would still like to see something that matches what I have in front of me so I can compare this to what was there before and have a much better idea on the changes that have been taking place.
I agree. We will give you an existing conditions plan.
Is that like where those where it shows flower shrubs, those were additional?
No,
Well, I
don't think
see-
so.
An existing condition plan of what exists on
Uh,
the ground today.
Right.
I will give you an existing condition plan that shows what's on the ground today.
All right, fine. Thank you. Anything else?
No
Andy?
questions, thank you.
Tommy, none?
No.
Okay, you want the,
Madam Chairman, I just need to inform the board about something. There's been a number of emails that have come in regarding this project. If you are going to continue it, you should read the file. There were about, I'd say, 15 or so, all in opposition for various reasons. But
right, but it's important for,
it's important for the board to know that the emails did come in over the last 3 days. They are in the record for you to read if you'd like.
right, but it's also important for the board to remember that our decision is made on,
It's based on your regulations.
On the regulations.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, can I add that I personally did become aware of that earlier today, and I have had the opportunity to read all of the letters and the emails that were sent in. And I would
Okay,
encourage
but we'll
others
have-
to do so
yeah,
as well.
and we'll have a couple of months. So I heard a date of first or second week of February?
Yes.
February 6th.
Perfect.
Is that your birthday?
So moved.
No, it's just a perfect day.
No, I'm January. You're March, aren't you?
I'm April.
Oh, April.
I'm in Aries.
So at the request of the applicant, I'll move to continue this hearing until the 6th of February.
Second.
Okay, any other questions on the board?
Can I
Any-
just make the
Yeah,
continuance, subject to the fact that there not be 3 feet of snow on the ground? It is February.
We hope that it's not, otherwise we'll have to continue it again.
Haven't you noticed global warming exists, is real?
No, we
Please
have to
be
give
quiet
the
about that
audience
stuff.
the opportunity to make a comment, and then Tom is eager to come back to the meeting. Any comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second on the table for a continuance to February 6th. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Come back, Tom. Okay, Charles Jeffrey and Veronica Jordan, 207 Meadow Neck Road, Wacoit, for permission to install and maintain approximately 960 linear feet of vinyl sheeting along a 725 plus or minus linear feet of coastal bank and 235 plus or minus linear feet along existing footings to repair, reinforce, and support the existing stone and concrete retaining wall and footings along with associated construction access, backfilling, planting, and restoration activities, and the associated clearing, excavating, grading, and landscaping. And I want to make a comment, if any of you didn't, are you from there? If any of you, okay, if anyone didn't get a chance to visit this site, it's one of the most magnificent sites I've seen in Falmouth. Maybe only comparable to, your house is mainly, only comparable to Courtney's house. I always say Courtney's house would be my favorite, but yours. You'll have to see Courtney's. Courtney has a good spot, and you have a fabulous, very peaceful today, but obviously not always peaceful. Jen, any comments?
I will save any of my comments until after the draft presentation, but I do echo that.
It's fabulous. Yeah.
My favorite property in town.
Mike, it's your turn.
My name is Michael McGrath. I'm Michael McGrath. I work for the firm Holmes and McGrath. We're civil engineers and land surveyors. We drew the plan and we wrote the notice of intent. This is on the northeasterly quadrant of Wacoit Bay. This is Meadow Neck Road. There's an existing house with a garage. There's a pool, and there's a coastal bank with a beach at the base, and there's a dune. There's an old man-made seawall that runs from from property line to property line. There's photographs in the notice of intent that shows that it's a vertical concrete and stone seawall. It's of some age. There are actually buttresses that were installed at the time of the original construction. There were 3 buttresses down there that have been removed as part of a previous repair. What the proposal is, that we propose to construct vinyl sheeting at the base from this property line to a point here. That sheeting will be driven in on the seaward side.
That's better.
On the seaward side of the footing. This diagram shows it's a representation of the typical seawall. There's a concrete footing, so that immediately on the seaward side, we're going to drive the vinyl sheeting. The vinyl sheeting looks, it's sort of the U-shaped that's over and over, and at every joint, there's going to be holes drilled into the concrete footing, so they drive them, and then they'll connect the sheeting to the concrete footing at every joint. They will then, on this section, they will fill the voids inside with concrete. Then there's another
Which section? Which section? They'll do that?
Pardon me?
This section here.
What I just described is from here to here.
Oh, okay.
And then from here to here, the wall is,
Falling down.
it's partially collapsed. A lot of it has a dune on top. There was a dune constructed in front of it for a while, and that's a slightly different technique. Here is a representation of the wall, or where the wall used to be. There is the concrete footing. But in this case, where the wall is, a lot of it's leaning, and some of it has collapsed, we're actually going to drive the sheeting in front of it. We're going to actually not only put the bolts into the concrete footing, but we're going to make holes into the stone and concrete wall, and we're going to drive in a helical rod, and then there'll be a whale that will be constructed to basically provide a lateral support for these tie rods. In the back of this, we'll fill this with sand. So that section that I just showed you is from here to here. In between, there'll be a diagonal drop in this, and that is depicted on with this section. So when we have marked on the ground a staging area, and they have actually gone down that slope before with crawler type equipment. They will build a temporary ramp out here. When they do this work, they'll be coming along the beach. There's dune vegetation all along here. They will have to restore the dune vegetation that they disturbed. They will have to revegetate in kind. Most of it, there's a moffula, but there's patches of bayberry and rosa rugosa. I believe that this is the best way of maintaining this wall. It is in the process of failure, and I think this is the least obtrusive way of repairing the wall. We did look at other alternatives, such as riprap, but it was much more damage to the coastal banks, so we thought this was the least intrusive method of providing that wall with long-term stability. By driving, one of the phenomena that occurs in along the ocean is if you have a vertical face and water comes in, it actually will erode this down. And so by driving the sheeting, it will stop the erosion. If you've looked at some of the ones that have failed, you can reach underneath the seawall. Are there any questions I can answer?
Jen?
Mike, on the lower section, the sheet piling is going to be basically at grade, like we discussed down the field, right, Mr. Jeffries?
Yeah.
Okay.
To the top of this.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm visualizing that correctly.
It
Yeah.
it
okay.
says shown.
Yeah, and on the higher section, like, there were a lot of, like, cedars up in that area. Are they going to transplant those cedars? Are they gonna be disturbed when they?
It looks
come
like they're
out
not
of the
gonna,
sheet?
looks like they're not gonna disturb them.
No, I didn't, okay.
The ramp is.
Sir?
already- Yeah, oh, sorry.
You may answer, but you have to come up and
Oh,
tell the
sorry.
world who you are, even though we know who you are now.
Only Mr. Jeffries, I've gotten some questions on whether or not those trees would be removed, and that's why I'm just trying to visualize.
Okay, so south of the ramp, there are 3 groups of eastern red cedars. I say groups because in 2 places, I think there are 2 growing right next to each other. They're mature, they're quite high, they're maybe 15 to 20 feet high. They're set back from the wall, the first group is set back about 8 feet, and then the other ones are maybe 12 feet. And there's no reason for any machinery to be going near them. However, I would ask when they do the helical screws in, that they try to aim them away from their taproot, because the taproot's the sensitive part of that tree. And I don't think that should be a problem.
You might want to be there when they're driving them.
I intend to be.
You might want to be on site.
And you have the same contractor that we met out in the field?
Well, we'll probably put out a competitive bid, but I expect that he will be the one that does it.
Okay.
And part of the job may be done by George Patello, who also did the beach nourishment last time. He knows the property well.
Okay, only just because I spoke with those people
Yes,
on
yeah.
the technical parts of this out in the field, so that's why I asked the question. No additional questions?
Okay, Michelle?
Those were actually all my questions. I don't have anything additional.
Okay, Court?
No question.
Tom?
A unique property deserves a unique repair. The helicals, recently I've had a chance to witness the strength of these, and it is a really nice way to tie that back with minimal intrusion, and they will be able to guide it pretty precisely. You know, there's a lot of variable here that in that whaler, you're not going to have to, I have every confidence that they'll be able to avoid the things they need to. No other questions?
I'm sure Mr. Jeffries, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure he will be watching this, but let's just also put that in the conditions. Like, that he has to watch. No. That we have to avoid those tap roots.
Oh, yes, certainly.
Yeah.
Just a clarification, the top of the new vinyl sheets is about going to mimic the top of the existing wall?
Yes.
Is that it? So it varies and it's going to...
No higher. The wall's fairly even. I mean, there's a slight grade.
It's like a...
But it should, in that area, there's probably not much change in height where we're going to do this. We're only doing this about along the southern, maybe 200 feet or so.
Where we walk the edge.
Yeah,
Mike.
we worked, yeah. Okay,
You
that's fine.
walked on top of the wall?
No, I walked along the bottom part.
Oh, okay.
That
And people used
that
to
was
do
my
that.
intent.
That was a very favorite activity of the local kids.
Oh,
In
along the
In
top?
the old days, yeah, walked the whole,
I did not walk along the top.
it's difficult to do.
I'm
Ed.
happy.
Yes, I have to confess, I did not visit this site, and your comments, Betsy, making me maybe regret that I didn't. But I was all the way down in Woods Hole, and this is like,
The
the other
opposite
side
end
of
of
a
town.
large town, quite a long drive, but Mr. McGrath, in this case, all of the photographs you provided, I found very helpful, and after looking at all of it, I made the decision that I didn't necessarily need to visit this particular site because you captured the essence of what we needed to know. Thank you.
Your loss, Ed. You should go out and visit while you still can.
Okay.
Tommy?
No, it looks well prepared, and I think it's a good thing to be doing.
I have a question. I thought in the, again, part of your narrative, I don't know if to give you credit for this, Mike, but you had an interesting history of what you saw there, which I think is really important for people to realize how dynamic these systems are. But the dune, and who did you refer to it as a dune, on that southern part, did that just get blown up and caught there? When you bought it, was there sand up there? No.
Now, when we bought the property, the wall was there. There was actually, on the landward side of the wall, was actually, the ground was probably 3 feet below the top of that wall. So it came down, and there was this basically about 3 or 4 feet. And then gradually, about halfway down the wall, the bank came up to the top. What you see now was added in 2002, which is referred to there. We not only added sand on the beach, but it made it pretty much a continuous slope right up to the top, or near the bottom of these cedar trees.
Oh, okay.
And actually, what you see now is the sand is actually about, in some places, 1.5 feet higher than the wall.
Right.
And so picture, that was all added, and then another 2 or 3 feet down here was added.
Oh, okay. But that was all added artificially. That didn't just,
Oh, that's right.
just didn't accumulate there with the
There
winds.
is no movement of sand with wind in that area.
Okay,
Never.
but with water.
Very much so. But mostly moved away.
Yeah.
In other words, what we discovered was anything above the present beach, when a tide would come up high, it would immediately, just like a kid making a sandcastle, the water would touch it and it would just collapse. And that's what you see now. And there's only a few feet now of that original sand left. So the beach has basically been leveled.
Yeah.
And of course, some of it has moved northward, as can be seen by, if one were to examine the sandbar at the mouth of the Municus. It's been continuous deposit there.
It's been added.
For probably 100 years.
Yeah.
And there's no supply south of us. The next door neighbor has a little bit of a supply, but the water doesn't seem to get in there to wash it onto our beach. And then you have the rest is stone all the way down to Concert Island. So that's the end of we're the end of the supply.
Mm. Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Do we have enough information to make a decision?
Motion to close and take it under advisement.
Second?
Any other questions? Any questions from the audience? Jack, no question from you? Okay, motion on the table to close this hearing and take it under advisement. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for the compliment.
You're welcome, Mike.
We try and keep it
Try
balanced.
not
I
to.
complained on a previous hearing, so on this one, I got to give you credit and a gold star. Thank you.
Oh, gold star.
Blue.
Whoa. I wonder if he'll be here next week. He'll certainly be a Grinch next week. Courtney, you got your coal ready for next week?
Yep.
All right. Thank you. Continued request for, Jack's been very patient in the back. Continued request for hearings under a notice of intent. James and Christine Blue, 20 Eldridge Drive, North Falmouth, for permission to remove the existing
Thank you.
timber stairway and reconstruct a new elevated timber stairway on a coastal bank, install native trees and shrubs, and the associated excavating and landscaping. Jen?
Yes, Madam Chairman, I'll fit
Thank you, Jen. Thank you,
Jack?
Chairman Gladfelder. Hi, everyone. I'm Jack Vaccaro. I'm here to represent Hall Construction. This is a project that came before the commission as an RDA 4 or 5 months ago for permission to reconstruct an existing wooden walkway that leads from the top of the coastal bank at the northwest corner of the site down to a small beach area on the shores of Megansett Harbor. When the commission reviewed this project then, they determined that the project could only go forward with first a notice of intent being filed. That's the purpose of my visit this evening to your commission. I'm should point out that the finding at that time, the negative determination, included that there was an area of coastal bank that had been some pruning, clearing had been done unauthorized, and the applicant was asked to address a restoration of that portion of the coastal bank as part of this notice of intent application. So we have done that also. So briefly about this site, it is waterfront property located on Megansett Harbor, obviously. It's about just under 20,000 square feet of developed residential property. There is this very steep coastal bank at the rear of the property. It's about 25 feet in height. The lower 10 feet of it is armored. Below that, there's a cobbly beach and a stone revetment, groin, and then, of course, land under the ocean, Megansett Harbor. So the work, again, would involve reconstruction of the existing wooden stairs at the northwest corner of the site that traverses this steep coastal bank, and also replanting of a portion of the coastal bank up at the top, directly behind the house. As far as rebuilding this, I want to point out that the existing structure is at grade. We've got stairway stringers that are built right at ground level with treads that are essentially at ground level as well. The proposal is to raise this up on wooden posts. So the structure will now be, other than the posts, it will now be elevated 2 feet above the surface of the coastal bank. Of course, in opening up that section of the bank, we do want to be cautious about the possibility of erosion. So we're proposing to try to stabilize the area under the new stairs by installing a series of 3 segments of jute mesh, 4 mil jute mesh, so fairly tight jute mesh. We're going to install them so that there's overlap between these segments and that the upper part of each of these segments of mesh will be trenched in, and the remainder will be anchored in place with staples. We're also going to attempt to replant as best we can under the deck. We've spec'd out sweet fern as a suitable plant for that location. There are other areas of sweet fern growing pretty well on that bank, and so we'd like to try to use that as a good plant for that area. Otherwise, the mitigation plantings that are shown really limited to an area of the bank that's about 25 feet wide, is measured at the top of the bank, by about 10, 12 feet deep. And we're proposing for that area 3 cedars, 14 northern bayberry, and additional sweet ferns along the upper part of that affected area. So that's really what we have for a project. Be happy to take any questions the commissioners might have this time.
Okay, have we heard this before?
There was an application that was brought forward to you as an RDA a few months back.
But this isn't really a continued request.
No.
This is a request.
No, they continued it from
Last week.
Oh, okay.
Beg your pardon, yeah. Had a conflict last week. And,
So you didn't open
It
it last
was,
week?
it was not open, correct.
Okay,
Correct.
so I'm on the quorum,
Yes, you are.
so I can ask some
We're
questions.
glad to have you.
Thank you, Jack. Who'd like to ask questions first?
Does Jen want to ask questions first?
Jen doesn't have any questions. Tom?
Sure. This was presented,
Who?
was something different before the IDA, wasn't it? There was a discussion, there was a set of plans that showed,
No, it was a lot to either side. It wasn't this lot, because the lot that we had the stairs right down the center.
okay, all right.
We're talking about the neighborhood. We had
Yep.
another project in this neighborhood, but it was a different lot. It was the one where you fell off the stairs.
Is that the one you're talking about, Tom?
Yeah, that's what, that's,
That's
yep,
not this lot.
yep. Gotcha. So, now this makes a whole lot more sense. Thank goodness. Because I'm like, wow, I just had to delete that altogether. The raising it up on the bank, I'm very much, that is a good thing to do. And the jute, I have every confidence that with the proper installation, you will have minimal, if any, erosion. I firmly believe that because the sites that I've had to deal with things similar to this and the size of it and being able to wrap through that. The only thing that I'm wondering is how deep are you going to be going with these posts?
Well, we are calling out for 4 feet of penetration.
Okay.
And we're hoping that we can actually use the same areas where currently the posts are going down. Those will all be coming out, new material going down in, but we'd like to try to use the same,
Are you going to
not
have
the
to
same
put,
post holes, the same general areas.
you're going to have sonotubes there?
We're going to use sonotubes only on the upper part, so we're going to be building this elevated platform that the stairs will terminate at. And
Okay.
those will be supported on sonotubes.
That's,
But otherwise, no, we prefer to just put the posts right into ground. And the reason for that is because the engineer on this project had some recent problems with a similar project in a different town where the structure actually was shifting off of the sonotube pad, so we wanted to get something directly anchored into the bank. And I think by doing that, we can affect a lot less area, although it's, even with the sonotube, it wouldn't be a huge area of disturbance on the bank, but it'll be a smaller, as opposed to a 10 or 12-inch diameter sonotube, we're going to be just using post hole diggers essentially to put a 4x4 post into the bank.
Anything else?
thank you.
Mike?
A general comment, it needs doing, so that there's no question in my mind that it's a good project, so, and I like the approach.
Thank you.
Ed?
Yeah, just may not be particularly relevant to our work, but I'm very curious, and you do mention here, is this a stairway that's used by a neighborhood association?
It
or
is.
something like that?
There is a neighborhood right-of-way, a 10-foot wide right-of-way that is located on that westerly property line, so the neighbors all do use this to some extent to get down to,
And they are the ones who will be using this stairway?
yes.
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tommy?
No questions, just a comment. I think it's a good idea. I like how you're doing it minimally invasively by digging by hand, no equipment and bank. It's good, and I think that'll work fine. Just going in 4 feet with a 4x4.
Thanks.
Michelle?
I think that it sounded good. I was just curious if we needed a planting plan for, there's nothing really on the plans.
There was a bank restoration plan that was submitted.
Oh, did I miss that? Okay, so as long as there's a plan somewhere that shows it, I
You don't need to see it right now?
No, I don't.
Okay.
And the jute mesh, like somebody said, when installed correctly, will take care of all the problems. It's just, I rarely see them installed correctly, so.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like almost never. And it's not actually called out on the plan. So I think that, I guess it's all being done by hand. It's maybe not a huge deal, but it would be nice if it was actually on the plan that jute mesh is going to be used there, and maybe even a quick little graphic on it.
Is it on that one?
It's on the.
Is it on that one? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you
Yeah,
do
I
get
don't
to
know.
see it, Michelle?
On the right-hand side, you'll see a section devoted to
Okay.
jute net installation. It's all
Excellent.
spec'd out there.
Great,
Have you
that's it.
thought about using 50% grading for steps rather than wooden steps?
We prefer to use wooden steps. if it's something that the commission feels strongly about, it could be, certainly could be conditioned that way.
I'm just wondering whether you'd have more success growing something underneath it.
Yeah, it's, with 2 feet of separation, I mean, there's a good opportunity for the light to get, we're talking about a north slope to begin with, so it's.
Not much light's going to get there anyway.
No, but, you know, in looking, I took a good close look at the bank, particularly in the area that had been cleared, and we do see a fair amount of sweet fern growing in underneath the overstory of pines and bayberries, so it is something that can tolerate low sun conditions fairly well. So
Yeah.
the preference of
hope.
the builder, we hope, but the preference of the builder is to use wood if we could.
Okay.
No questions or comments?
Anything? All right.
I move that we close this hearing and take it under advisement.
Second.
Any other questions? Ann, do you want to ask your questions? No, Mike? Okay, there's a motion and second on the table to close this hearing and take it under advisement. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you very much, Commissioners.
Don't you want to be like Tim and tell us to have a good weekend? Tim Santos always says, have a good weekend.
On a Wednesday.
Great weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm waiting for a snowy day.
Yeah. We don't want snow for a few weeks.
Thank you.
Okay, vote orders. Everybody ready?
I think
That's-
Raj and Sadhna Bhatia, 182 Edgewater Drive East, East Falmouth.
There's no tuning, the forum on this is Ed, Mike, Becky, Ford, and Michelle. This is the dock project at 182 Edgewater. One of the issues that was brought up during the hearing was the 2 pilings on the north side of the dock that do not have the benefit of a permit or Chapter 91 license. This is that little, they were only reconstructing the plastic
Right.
section of that dock. The rest of the superstructure was going to remain. So the board had discussed special conditions to remove the pilings with confirmation that they were removed by staff. You don't want to have a barge go in there and remove
Right.
them and have them, so they can do everything at once, just have us run down there and check prior to reconstruction made as part of the dock. And then also, if you've been to the site, go down the staircase. On the north side of the staircase, there's these little set of steps that kind of goes into the marsh. They just kind of go into the marsh, and the commission expressed the desire to have that access to the salt marsh, either those stairs removed or blocked off so that people wouldn't get in the habit of trickling on the salt marsh. For the most part, all of the activity is kept along that staircase and pier, and that bank is pretty well established, and so the marsh stays into it. So let me know if you want to make a special condition. You'll definitely have a special condition for the removal of tiles, and a nice, like the little stairs.
Stairs should go.
It was my recollection that that was the engineering that said
that was fine.
that was not a.
I know,
Yeah,
but
so
I mean, it's not on the plans, so.
Could you get the other 2?
They have the other set
Yep,
of stairs, they're
yeah.
gonna have their lateral access
Yep.
for Chapter 91. It's just like, they have access underneath the deck to the walkout portion of the house.
Yep.
Okay, so
Yes.
I'll do a confirmation that that area has been blocked off as well prior to reconstructing the dock.
Okay. Or removal, blocked off or removed.
Yeah.
Could we have a motion?
Motion to accept the order as discussed.
Second.
Any further questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Joseph and Beatrice Morrow, 133 Surf Drive, Falmouth.
Yes, or she amended into this property twice, supposedly for the deck. It did not meet the regulations in the velocity zone. The applicant is going to come back, actually, just go quickly. Forum is Ed, Betsy, Tom Ford, and Michelle. Where was that? They've come back, they've reduced the size so that it meets the velocity zone requirement of 19 feet. They're removing the driveway on the surf drive side and relocating that, they'll be planting that, putting some buffer plantings in there, but keeping a path way through that.
It was all flooded today.
I know.
Did you see that?
So basically, the board really needs to decide what you'd like to do. We weren't happy with the original project, which is why they modified it and come back to you. They will be having the deck above the apron patio.
That they access from
where the wall
their upper part of the house.
that They
Right.
give them some sort of outdoor space there. Okay? Well, you're going around.
Any?
That means that.
Yeah, I mean, it was okay. I don't have any special conditions.
Okay. No, that's fine.
It's going to be better having them come in the back way than,
Off the surf drive.
Off the surf drive.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, personally, I did not like the additional structure moving closer to the resource area, and that's additional structure in a V zone, and it's new fill for that whole patio, which is displacing water, which does have a cumulative effect if every property would do this and you multiply it and whatnot, so I have issues, I continue to have issues with the project.
But it meets it's not in an A zone, so they can build on any side, and it meets the less than 200 square feet. Okay, could I have a motion?
Motion to accept the order as discussed.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
One opposed.
Okay, got that? Okay, JBR Realty Trust, William Rugg trustee, 163 Worcester Court.
Same form as before, this was just fixed
Drainage.
drainage over at Worcester Park, and that was.
Yeah, I don't think, we didn't have any
We'll do the
special
amendment
conditions,
plan.
right?
You know, it's standard special
Yeah.
conditions when you're dealing with a large building.
Right, I mean, I don't think we
And that was all
pointed out
filled
anything.
In their stormwater management report.
The only thing I pointed out was a deeper
Yes.
planting media.
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
buyer.
Less crushed stone, more,
Yeah.
These special conditions, you're saying three, that was that first step.
And he thought that was fine, so.
and that was clearly articulated in the minutes.
Yes.
Yes, it
Oh,
was.
it was?
Yes, it was.
Tim was here and Tim presented this to us.
Yes.
Okay, could we have a motion?
Motion to accept the order as discussed.
Second.
Any further discussion? Yes.
Jen, who reviewed the drainage calculations?
We did, the town engineering department did not review them, and that's correct.
Then whose jurisdiction is it? I mean, that we haven't looked at them, and I'm all in favor of the project, don't get me wrong.
What do you mean, whose jurisdiction?
Well, I
It's ours.
mean, we take, in previous projects, we've had somebody take a look at the drainage to be sure that it looks, some minimal standard, and.
Well, the minimal standard is that it has to show an improvement.
I looked at it to some extent.
Yeah, and it has to show an improvement from,
I agree.
the most minimal standard is that it has to show an improvement from what exists.
And
And that's certainly.
an overview says they do. I mean, you look at
Yeah.
it, it looks like it's a step in the right direction. I'm looking not so much at this project, but in the general practice of how the board look, as how we're gonna look at, who's gonna take a look at drainage calculations. 'cause it-
Engineering will do that for you.
Okay, so on this one, I'm not worried, but,
Yeah.
very good.
And
There we go.
And we do ask Scott.
Okay.
Scott does that.
All right.
Michelle has done it in the past, although it's an extra burden for her. Could we have a motion?
I thought we did.
We,
have a
Oh, we already voted?
Nope.
no.
No.
We
Oh,
didn't vote, but we have a motion.
we have a motion on the table. All in favor of the motion on the table, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Charles and Thomas Crane, 26 and 39 Juniper Point Road, Woods Hole.
Another cool little property.
Can you do the quorum
Oh,
on this
this
one?
is beautiful.
Yeah.
You would have been on this one. It was the same night.
Oh, I do have it, it's right here.
Betsy,
I'm looking for it.
Courtney, and Michelle, this
Thank
is
you.
for the addition, the terrace. They're removing that greenhouse. There was a concern
They're gonna
about
protect the
water
tree.
That I don't think we were truly understood,
Oh.
the siltation fencing was.
It was a siltation fence, yeah.
but
Right,
that was
yep.
a concern, they saw fence, and they wanted to make sure it was going to be on the applicant's property, not theirs. There are some isolated coastal banks that aren't being affected, and they're also installing the septic. So,
And I think as a special condition, even though it's off our property, you might just mention to protect that tree.
oh, yeah.
I mean, off our
the tree.
jurisdiction.
Yes.
The tree that
Work
is
within
on-
our jurisdiction could
It's actually
impact,
within your jurisdiction because of the isolated coastal bank, I pointed that out to you.
and the roots are within our jurisdiction.
But I did specifically ask them to look at that again before they came in, and they did, and that's why you met them out there. Because they went back out to look at the tree.
Well, actually, they went back out to meet Courtney. It's a good thing I showed up.
I'll move to accept the order as discussed.
Second?
Any further questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Deborah and Paul Hennessy, 569 Courier Road, East Falmouth.
Yes, this is for that little staircase down the bank. The board wanted to.
What little staircase down the bank?
The one on,
Courier Road.
yes.
I'm blanking out on this one.
It's
We
out on the
wanted
pond.
a
We had the
bigger
little
footing
stepway
for
came
the-
down.
Oh, I remember
Yeah.
this one. This was another cool property.
Yes.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Very cool.
This is when I said an 8-foot instead of an 8-inch.
Right, we knew.
Yeah.
8-foot footage. But the board had asked for some additional information regarding the trees on site, near where the project site was, and they also had to actually wait because they do happen to be in a natural heritage district. So it was continued for that. That has been settled. I think they've.
Nice little project.
Concerns, there were some concerns about the construction technique, and I believe that has been addressed.
It has.
Okay.
Okay. May I have a motion?
Motion to accept the order as discussed.
Second.
Any further questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Owen Potter, 64 Irving Road, East Falmouth.
Yes, Madam Chairman, this is the raise and rebuild of the structure down at the end of Irving Road. Oh,
I don't think I want this one.
I'm getting it wrong. Mike, Betsy, Tom, Ed, Courtney. Mike, Betsy, Tom, Ed, Courtney, yes. There was a wetland violation associated with the property that they've incorporated a restoration of.
Oh, I
into the
remember this one.
planting plan. There were a number of trees that were removed. There was some concern with some of the abutters regarding the placement of those trees. I did have a long conversation with the abutter regarding that. The applicant's planting plan has addressed the concerns of the staff and has one mitigated for the proposed increase in impervious surface on the property as well as restore the violation along Salt Marsh. So the staff is pretty comfortable with the planting plan. I think the main point that the board needs to look at this point is the proposed breakaway panel. This house is raised, this is in the velocity zone, it is raised.
RAISED.
Yes, 2 feet above that elevation, so it will be on pilings. The applicant has requested the use of breakaway panels. The board in the past had approved them in some locations, not approved them in others, given site-specific conditions, and we do need to have a discussion on that. We can have a discussion on the planting plan as well, but Mark worked very diligently to get that planting plan, and he felt it would be, and he felt would address the restoration that was needed on site.
Okay.
Well, I have my homework.
I have some comments on this, but Ed, since you're prepared, I'll let you start and have first comments. I believe that the board's main concern was the breakaway panels and whether this is an appropriate site.
Site for that type of construction.
Right.
Correct. If you have any questions on the planting plan, please bring those up first. We all comfortable with the planting plan? Nod if you are.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
I'm not going to nod on command. Ed, you want to make some comments about?
Well, yes, I do, and that's why
The proposed breakaway panels on this site, whether
Yes.
it's an appropriate technique
Yes.
for here.
Yes. But of course, this breakaway panel issue is one that's come up repeatedly, and I think we and myself have sometimes gone in different directions. We had a project recently where I voted for it, but it's a very site-specific project. In fact, even before we voted, I recall someone, it was either Tom or Odd at the time, and she said, oh yes, site-specific. So yeah, that has nothing to do with this project and sets no precedent because they're very unique characteristics. But on breakaway panels, we never have had a long discussion, but I've had a lot of thought about the subject over the last couple of weeks. I also had the occasion to visit one of the areas most negatively impacted by Sandy. I only visited because it's a place where I grew up. So I had the opportunity to see firsthand just how devastating a major tidal surge can be. And even though I'd seen lots of videos and all sorts of pictures people sent me, you cannot really appreciate what I would call a real gut-wrenching situation when you're actually there and you look around at 360 degrees and see just complete and utter devastation. But there will be a lot of learning for FEMA, I think, as a result of Sandy, and there'll probably be some kind of changes made to things like building codes as a result, because some structures did survive, even when a structure right next to it might have collapsed. And some structures floated off their foundations, which was a whole separate set of issues. But I think on this issue, I have 3 points to really discuss here. Number one, could breakaway panels impact the wetlands in major storm? That's the reason why we have sometimes denied them. And I think, yes, they do have an impact because you have debris strewn in marshes and in the buffer areas. You also get damage when people are out in those marshes and buffer areas trying to clean up all of the floating debris. And we've also sometimes talked about breakaway panels being floating projectiles, and that's a safety issue, even though we don't actually regulate safety. But it comes up. So these are the reasons to have some objections to breakaway panels. But as I gave this thing a lot of thought, and actually did go online looking at FEMA websites and even looking at Massachusetts building code, I come up with a real question that I encourage you all to think about, and that is is this issue of breakaway panels a matter that falls within Conservation Commission jurisdiction? I asked that question because, and I went back looking through our regulations, there's no mention specifically of breakaway panels in FWR 10.00. I also do believe that if you want to start, if we wanted to get involved, and we have been involved, that it's not something that's enforceable. If you want to really check and see if a breakaway panel is in fact a breakaway panel and is installed appropriately, you need access to the interior of the structure, and I don't believe we have access, and I'm not sure we have a right to access to the interior. That's sort of a question mark, but I don't think it's very practical because we don't enter structures when we do our inspections for a certificate of compliance. I'd also suggest that, to my knowledge, I can't think of any other structural elements in a building that we ever have discussed and talked about in the way that we do on breakaway panels. All of which leads me to realize that, yes, these things are regulated by our town building department. And from everything I know about our building department, they do their job well, and then they enforce the appropriate regulations. There are very strict guidelines for breakaway panels that FEMA does on the FEMA website, and FEMA does support them. But those, let me move to the next subject here, because there's a question of galvanized straps to hold breakaway panels and prevent them from breaking away. That has come up. So let me say, FEMA definitely does prohibit the use of any kind of straps, and I have quoted them at the bottom of this document. But in terms of the breakaway panels themselves, they're acceptable. FEMA does tell you how to do them. And a very important part of the FEMA guidelines is that they not be attached to any vertical supports. They're only attached to the headers and the footers. FEMA even tells you how many nails to use and what kind of size nails. So there's very, very specific regulations that we don't really have to get involved in. And you may suspect from where I'm going here is something I don't think we actually should be involved in. And that's going to be my position unless I learn something new going forward. I would suggest that a breakaway panel that doesn't break away, that's one tethered by strong straps, that's something of an oxymoron. It's a contradiction, and it certainly does not meet the FEMA guidelines. So anyone who proposes to us, oh, you should allow this because they're going to have it strapped and it won't end up in the marsh, well, the next step is the building department, and they're not going to get through the building department with that kind of a proposal anyhow. So, and we did have some testimony at the hearing that seemed to suggest that FEMA had approved these galvanized straps, and that testimony was totally unsupported. We did request additional documentation. The engineer declined the opportunity to provide it, and my research on the FEMA website says they are definitely not a good idea. And actually, the direct quote from that website, and I put in the address from the FEMA documentation. There's a direct quote on the bottom of my little document here that talks about how such things as connectors, bolts, lag screws, metal straps, or hurricane fasteners shall not be used. So where am I netting out? I don't think these breakaway panels are something relevant to the work of this commission. I think it's something that's adequately handled by the building department, and we shouldn't get involved in it. So you all may disagree, but I spent a lot of time working on it, and that's where I'm at now.
Okay, I'm
So,
going
I'm
to
done.
comment, Ed. I'm not sure where you're going with this, actually. I'm not sure what your bottom line was when you said that, but I'll
Well,
tell you.
I don't want
But I'll
to
tell you what my concern.
approve anything which impacts what they do or do not do with breakaway panels. It's not our purview. That's where I am.
Well, they requested these panels in this project.
Right, so any order we have should sort of disclaim any point of view, I think, on breakaway panels. I'll
Well,
leave it up to the building
I'm gonna
department.
take a point of view, and I'll tell you what my point of view is, and this came up in two places where we didn't allow breakaway panels. We have allowed breakaway panels. We allowed it in Little Island Road, where it was an area where it was sort of built on a bank anyway. Where we haven't allowed it are places where the water could clearly wash through. And the reason we didn't allow it is, I mean, everybody knows that what you're going to do if you put breakaway panels is you're going to use it as a storeroom. And if you use it as a storeroom, and the panel's supposed to slide back and forth, but there's something stored there, it's not going to function as a breakaway panel. So basically, that area that should function to have water flow through is going to act like a solid structure. So that's why I'm opposed to breakaway panels in this particular
Well, if
site.
it's tethered, it's put great stress on the structure. But FEMA's guidelines are
Well, if
such
it's
that
supposed
it
to
will
move-
break away
if it's-
sufficiently in a wave, and they have all the calculations on the force
But
of
if
waves.
if it can't move readily.
Or if it's strapped, it's not a breakaway panel.
Because if it hits against the car that's there, or whatever it is that's there, it's basically you have a solid structure.
If it doesn't break away.
Yeah.
So that's not a breakaway panel by FEMA's definition. It has to break away. And the construction guidelines are such that it will break away when a 2 or 3 foot wave comes, and they've calculated all the required forces. And the website gets into all of that very technical engineering stuff, which is beyond
If
me.
it does break away, you're adding a lot of, as you pointed out, detritus to the surrounding area. If it's prevented from breaking away, that whole structure there is going to get a lot more force than it would if water could rush through, which is why you put things on pilings.
Right. But
So,
the question is, who regulates this?
well, this is a proposal that came before us. We have to make a decision whether we're going to allow what was proposed or whether we're going to make a finding and not allow it. We can't duck making a decision. So,
If it's out of our purview, we can pass it on to building department.
it is our purview as to what is being done in our jurisdiction and what impact that may have on the environment. So,
Well, I anticipated we would have slightly different opinions on this, and yours
You-
is,
you can't
yours
pass
is good
off-
and
you-
well expressed.
you can't
and let's
pass
ag-
off the
let's agree to
responsibility,
disagree.
Ed.
Yeah.
yes.
I did not go to the FEMA website to review this portion of what you had, but that's just a very small portion of what that
Yeah.
website contains.
Well, the address is down there.
I understand that, thank you, Ed. I believe that in the file, there's a letter from the building department about this.
It's a letter to the building department by a company that makes breakaway panels, and they certainly sort of have a vested interest in seeing their product be used in the marketplace.
And in an open piling situation, we cannot restrict people putting things underneath there. So if in a storm event, they pull their boat, and they put their boat underneath there on a trailer, so be it, that's gonna be there.
Or it'll float away when the water rushes through.
Right, but I'm just saying that just because there's a panel there does not mean that a good steward wouldn't realize the function of the panel. When someone makes an investment in a home like this, where there is a structure and they know the possibilities of damage, to minimize that and breakaway panel, you call a tissue a Kleenex, you know, just because it's termed as a breakaway panel doesn't truly mean that it breaks away and floats away. There's many breakaway panels that are of a normal window well size, depending on the heights and widths and all that type of thing, in solid concrete, not open pile. They have little stainless steel windows that are a breakaway panel. That's not what is being proposed here, but when you say breakaway panel, that's all-inclusive to all kinds of types of construction to respond to different stimulus hitting it. In here, the panels, I don't have a real breakdown on specifics other than the narrative. The site-specific, yes, yes, we are. And they've made so many, the vertical connections that you reference in that. And
That
the
FEMA
Thompson
references.
correct, that FEMA references. Again, I don't have a direct design in front of me, but if we reference the one that was past approved, these panels are to lay down and let the flotsam and jetsam and all that type of thing. This is not, I know that we have cumulative effects. This is safeguarding. I truly believe when someone, and I have to feel this way because of all that's involved in the permitting, the architecturals, the commitment on building a structure like this, that they want to put good money forward, and that their investigations are showing that this is what they're proposing. If we deny the breakaway panel, so be it. But the activity underneath there without breakaway panels, I think could be far more detrimental to the environment because of loose structures stored underneath, which we would have no control over. With the panels in here, it doesn't mean that there's a 14-foot wall that flops down and just, it may be just a certain portion of it. And not every panel is going to break. And not every storm is going to make it do it. You know, I really think that there's tie-downs, there's hardware, there's thousands and thousands of dollars of hardware that are going to go into a structure like this by code. Tie-downs that are going to go all the way into the piling, from the ridge all the way down to the piling. You know, it's incredible the amount of engineering that goes into a structure like this. It's no longer a very simple, just generic blueprint, go build it. When they're in here like this, I think that the engineered pieces that are going to be part of this home will be able to respond as humanly possible. Could this whole thing get wiped off? Absolutely. But I guarantee you that this structure, compared to others in that neighborhood, would be able to respond to any other event far superior than one that is not brought up to code like this structure would be. That's it.
You keep looking at me like I disagree with that. I don't at
No,
all.
I
don't at all.
I
I just think it's a building department issue.
I have to agree with Tom. You know, having looked at these things and having been involved with putting similar types of structures up, essentially it's kind of like a house of cards. You know, I mean, that's how you've got to visualize one of these breakaway panels. And absolutely, FEMA is correct in anyone designing a building code or designing these things to work properly is not going to fasten them to any kind of vertical surface of piling or whatever. They're attached to the underside of the top of the building or the bottom, and the force of the waves and the wind and so on is what causes them to flop down by the straps or whatever is engineered to hold them in place. It's like a tether, so the thing doesn't fly all over the place. So that's one point. And so I think if properly designed and engineered, I personally don't see an issue with it in a velocity zone. I mean, it's got to meet the codes, it's got to be properly engineered, it's got to be permittable. Betsy raises a legitimate concern that if you enclose it and hide it from the street and public view, it's going to become a storage area for everything in the world, and when the storm comes, all this stuff is going to be flying around. And I would also agree that if, you know, it's going to be very difficult for us to enforce that, but I would also suggest that if you had lattice work or nothing, people could store stuff underneath there and just as much. And I'm not sure that you can presume guilt. You follow? I don't have a problem with these things if they're tethered and they're properly designed.
Michelle, any comments?
I am not on the quorum.
What a shame. Tommy?
Am I in this quorum?
You hope not.
No,
It is actually
Yeah, it's,
acceptable to join the
I-
discussion even if you're not in a quorum.
I think that we all agree that these are highly engineered, and tethered and not tethered, I don't really see
Yeah,
how.
actually, tell me or not. but-
Well, I'm still in the discussion though, that's it. But, I mean, we're not deciding the nailing pattern on the sheeting or the roof shingles.
no, I mean, all of that is building code.
Right,
Right,
so why is
right.
it, I mean, I understand that we're in charge of the site work and the footprint.
Yeah,
and all
it's
of
only
that.
whether yes
So
or no
why-
on panels.
Well,
So if
why
you're
is that
comfortable
up
with
to-
panels, because if we said that the panels are detrimental to the environment, having panels there is
Any
more
material from
detrimental
this
to the
house could end
environment.
up in the resource area. I mean, I don't understand why this is any different from the roof shingles.
Or the roof itself, if
Or
it's
the-
not
or
tethered
the
and
all-
high wind.
structure.
All of that could, but we're talking about water damage
And is
from
that under our
surge.
jurisdiction?
Yes. That's,
Yes, it is, yes.
But it's not in this book anywhere.
yes, it is, 1038. We have a whole section.
Says nothing
on
about breakaway
land subject
panels.
to
It says-
water.
And it says structural
Doesn't say anything
engineering
about
and breakaway
breakaway
panels.
There's no definition of breakaway panels. I checked.
No, but the,
The regulations say open piling, stop saying it's not.
says
your
open piling.
jurisdiction,
It says
it
open
is
pilings.
some
Breakaway
jurisdiction
panels
of this type of
is different from
construction.
open pilings.
It even says open piling, if your regulations under land subject.
Say open pilings.
Say open pilings.
They require, what is that?
Well,
Chapter is
they
it?
say open pilings. Now, from a building standpoint, whether it has breakaway panels or not, this is an open pile
And where-
It's
structure.
an open pile.
And where can I find that chapter for later?
3A,
1038.
1038.
Thank you.
And that's all it says, it doesn't, Ed's right, it doesn't say anything about breakaway panels, it's something you guys have been grappling with. All your regulations say is open pilings.
Let's put a motion on the table.
Put a motion on the
No,
floor.
hey, you haven't had my 2 cents.
Oh! I expect 5 cents from you.
Well, you may. If you get back to site-specific, and it's a new project, then the issue of what's going to be stored underneath and how much will end up into a wetland is, site-specific and has to do with as what will be there. This is an existing structure.
That's going to be RAZE'd and RAISED.
But if the project doesn't proceed, if you put so many instructions on a project that it doesn't have, we're going to have the entire structure in the wetland.
Yeah,
And
I
this
think
is so much-
I think
this is so
structure-
much
I don't have
better-
any problem with this project,
This is so
except
much,
for the discussion about breakaway panels.
this is so much of an improvement. And frequently, we take a look and say, is this an improvement over what's there, or is this not an improvement? And the applicant is making an improvement, a great improvement. I mean, if you don't do anything, the whole
House is
flip,
going
the
to
whole
go.
house goes away, and now we get a structure that only a panel is going to go away. So for this one, I am clearly under the heading of, without making future commitments as to how I feel about it, for this specific project, I'm very much in favor.
So I think that was only worth a penny, but you
Okay.
can make a, you
Ah.
can, but you can make a motion.
My penny is worth the 70 cents that are sitting on the table, so.
Are you going to make a motion?
No, I'm gonna.
I make a motion to accept the project with the breakaway panels
As proposed.
as proposed.
Second.
Courtney, last word. Although I
Well, I
think,
think we're
I
talking-
think
we're
the two
gonna-
gentlemen
we're
to
gonna
my
talk
right will
about-
want the last word.
If we're gonna talk about 10.38, we have to talk about what, the key test here, which is a proposed project within a velocity zone, shall not destroy or otherwise impair the function of any portion of said landform and/or have an adverse effect on adjacent wetland resource area. Then it goes on and talks about, specific examples. But, so that if we apply that test, the question you ask is, do properly designed breakaway panels meet that test, or do they not meet the test? And if we determine that they meet that test, then we go ahead and approve it.
There's a motion and a second on the table. Does anybody else have any comments? 2 cents, 2 cents. It's worth 2 cents. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved.
That's your finding.
You never know where.
Augustine and Denise Santola, 123 Sherwood Drive.
Oh, yes, Madam Chairman, this was the project at Sherwood. If you remember, the original proposed house came much closer to salt marsh than the existing structure. The application was modified to build.
Was modified
raise and
because-
rebuild the new house.
Was modified because right down the board, everyone said it doesn't meet performance
Yes.
standards.
But the project was redesigned so that it falls within not the footprint, but the lateral, the closest
Right.
extent to the wetlands. And
The sheds are an issue.
Sheds are an issue, the appropriate mitigation for the house has been done. There are 2 sheds on the property, neither one is permitted. The board needs to decide whether or not you're going to make both sheds be removed, one shed be removed and one mitigated for, or they're both being mitigated for. If staff were to make a recommendation, I would allow one shed to remain and the other shed to be removed, but that either way, the sheds have to be mitigated for. Yes?
What? Excuse me?
Sorry.
Court.
Just a question to follow up on your, do you have a particular recommendation? If you
There's a-
have
there's a
little
change.
shed, Doesn't matter which one.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Oh, okay. Which one they remove their side by side?
I remember this one.
Thank you.
What you
No,
recommended they,
I was just wanted a clarification.
oh, yes.
On the original application, they had proposed themselves to remove the shed closest to the street. That would be my,
Remove closest to
the
street?
one closest
Yeah,
to the
because it's
street.
real
to-
close to the building.
And then allow for mitigation of that shed, leaving the other structure and allowing it and thus making it permittable.
No, that has to be mitigated for.
That is
This-
correct.
this is-
That's what I'm,
Yeah.
that's what I meant.
Okay, which shed do you want removed?
The one closest to the street,
Closest to the street removed and the other one mitigated for?
correct.
Okay.
That would be.
Everybody okay with that? Okay, let's put a motion on the
That would be my
table.
motion to have, accept the order as discussed with the shed references being addressed.
Second.
Okay, are we all on this one?
I don't think I am.
Oh,
Oh, you might not have been there for the first time.
Yeah.
I didn't know if this allowed that. Mike, Betsy, Tom, Ed.
Mike, Betsy, Tom, Ed. Well, that's a modest quorum. Okay, Mike, Betsy, Tom, Ed.
Yeah, I have a comment. I believe this is a property where there were mitigation plantings from a previous order of conditions were not installed.
Yes, they're incorporated into the design review.
Yeah, but I mean,
You want those installed before the...
I want them installed before anybody touches anything in the way of new work.
Okay.
Installed and inspected by Concom, and to the point where we can say, all right, that's what's supposed to be. We can't yet prove that there's 2 or 3 years of growing conditions.
Right.
So
Plus
as long
the-
as they're installed according to the previous plan, then new work can begin, and not a day before.
Okay.
Yeah, plus the mitigation for the,
It would
Okay.
make sense to do the additional
Yeah,
mitigation
I
at
mean,
the same time.
right.
But I'd leave that up to them. I just want the previous order of conditions
Okay,
closed out, so to
usually
speak.
there's a condition that they do all plantings prior to construction. If they want to construct in the winter time, we usually allow them to go forward with a date certain. Is that
No.
okay?
No.
Okay, if they want...
Only
to
because
start-
this property owner doesn't have a good record of performing.
Okay, that's fine. That's usually what happens, because the staff is the one that takes the brunt of, we want to start now, we can't put our plans in, it's not a good time. If they want to do it on this particular project, they gotta come back to the board.
It was unfortunate
Yes.
that they didn't play by the rules in the past.
No, that's fine, I just need to know how you want me to address it when the issue comes and lands on my desk.
Okay, the four of us,
We'll do the next two, next week.
wait a second.
Go ahead.
Yes?
No, to get clear, are we saying they can't start without,
That's what Ed is saying, they cannot start construction until the mitigation plantings for the previous order and shed go in.
They've ignored it, basically, and we can't tolerate that.
I
That's
appreciate,
my understanding of how Ed wants that written.
okay. I got to get back to a plant person. Can we start the mitigation now? Can they start now? Or are we telling them they can't start construction?
That is what you're pretty
They
much
can't
saying.
start construction until the spring, effectively. They probably won't anyway.
Well, probably is not what I'm comfortable with, to be honest with you.
Usually when something like that happens and it comes to a certain time of year, we give them a date certain where they have to put the plans in, knowing that they can't do that. That is how we typically handle the condition that you have in your special conditions that say, in certain cases, when mitigation plantings can be installed prior to construction where they're not going to be impacted by the construction project, that's what you usually like to see.
I have one other
During
solution.
winter,
What about a performance bond?
you can require that.
They have to put up a performance bond. Either they have to plant the plants, or they have to put up a performance bond that would cover planting the plants, so that money can be used to plant the plants by a date certain.
I'm comfortable with that.
The
I like
performance
that.
bond, they can't use that money, that is issued to, that is given to the town, they cannot use that money to install the plantings. They're gonna have to pay somebody.
Well, no, they have to,
Yeah, then we'll.
and then you give the money back.
Is there a
Okay.
dollar amount that we're looking for?
She knows, she'll know what it is.
We're gonna need to get free quotes, there's a process.
Okay, I would be comfortable with that.
That's fine.
That way, if they're,
Okay.
if they're true about their intent, and
Well, I'm still not comfortable, because this property owner, again, has not performed on previous orders of conditions.
But that's it, he can't
I'm just
He
raising
can't
the point of what I know.
start any construction until this performance bond has been posted.
or the plantings are in.
And the performance bond money doesn't go back to him until the plantings are in.
Yeah.
It's up to you guys.
Make a motion.
I would make a motion to accept the order as discussed with the performance bond as the caveat.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
I'm still opposed.
Okay, three ayes.
Okay.
Who'd like to make a,
I have one question, if I may.
yes, you may.
You have
Oh.
two other additional items.
Oh, we do? Sorry. Could I have an
You
agenda?
wanna do today?
I'll do anything, but I have a question, if I may.
Hold on.
96 Penzance Road, Mooney's. Did we vote that?
Yes, yes,
Okay, all right, and, all right.
yes.
Sorry,
All right,
I
thank you.
guess I'm too eager to leave. So we're not going to vote the other two tonight?
We could,
No, well, you could if you wanted to.
Let's wait till next week. That'll give us three for next week. Okay?
strike while the iron's hot.
You want to do it?
Yes.
Charlotte Bell, care of 145 Fay Road Trust.
That is just basically the planting plan. They had wanted to do the planting plan under an RDA. It's for the old farm, sorry.
I think you and I are on it.
Yeah, I did just have it, and I was like.
Tommy,
Me.
Ed, Mike, Tom, and Courtney,
Anyone else?
you saw the review of this, the planting plan, the staff has worked with the applicants to design that plan. It's to address an old order. Refine the planting.
You're comfortable with the planning? Okay.
Could I
I'll
have a-
move to adopt accept the order as proposed and discussed.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Oh, I know that. All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Nina Weber, 50 and 60 Associates Road, West Falmouth.
That is that small bank that they wanted to construct a larger revetment. They redesigned the project so that the proposed the new revetment wouldn't be any higher than that existing wall. It's that little wall that is,
They made just a little wall like
They
that.
dropped the height of it.
Yeah.
Make a motion to accept the order as discussed.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Enforcement order, Sandra Ann McIntosh, 26 North Path, East Falmouth, for digging and altering wetland resource areas and in buffered resource areas as defined in FWR 10.00 and 310 CMR 10.00.
yes, Madam Chairman, the commission saw this last week. It is basically an enforcement order to deal with an outstanding certificate of compliance. It has a planting plan. The planting plan has been accepted from the staff. The board voted to issue that enforcement order last week. It is what the applicant actually wanted.
Didn't we do this 2 weeks ago?
It might
Is this
be-
the one Jeff
Yeah,
Oppenheim?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, 2 weeks
okay,
ago.
so we're on this
Yeah,
quorum.
sorry about that. And so it's all drafted. All I need to do is just write it.
Okay,
We've accepted the plan. It's basically boilerplate enforcement order.
Yep.
Long-term requirements. We're going to be issuing a partial on the house for them.
Yep.
To move forward so they can transfer. the
We just
property.
need a motion.
I'll move to issue an enforcement order on Sandra Ann McIntosh, 26 Norris Road, East Falmouth.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved. Other business, approved Jim O'Connell as consultant for 163 T-Ticket Path.
So moved.
161.
Second.
You have to make a motion.
I
Oh, you
did.
moved.
I-
And a
I
second.
He didn't, and there's a second.
We have a motion and a second on the table. All in favor, say aye.
Hold on, can we have a discussion?
You can.
What do you want to discuss?
Yeah, what kind of guidance we got from Assistant Town Council, because the attorney for the property owner here raised a number of issues related to our hiring a consultant. Can you
Yeah.
tell us what the outcome was, Jen? Over.
Those issues have not been addressed. This board voted to accept a remand from the property owner with the
Provision that we,
provision that you were able to hire a consultant. That was last December of 2011. The staff has been contacted, this consultant in January. We hadn't heard anything from the applicant's attorney. It's now back, it's coming back before the board. We recontacted this particular consultant, very highly respected coastal geologist, went through what this board wanted with an assessment of the site, the regulations, and the project, and to render an opinion on all three.
But has the attorney now agreed to that?
No, and not at this point. We will not schedule the remand, and a letter has been sent. We will not schedule the remand until a check for the consultant's fee is mailed and received by the board. To that date, we have not done that. Whether or not Attorney Burke is going to appeal the decision to the Board of Selectmen, I am not, do not know at this point.
All right, so what you're saying, if he continues to object, it just won't happen.
Right.
Yes.
But if it does happen, is Mr. O'Connell appropriate? And certainly yes.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
It's a very narrow reason to appeal that to the Board of Selectmen. And staff is very confident and would not recommend someone to you that I did not feel confident would be able to meet the criteria that is required.
okay, Ed? Okay, motion and a second on the table to approve Jim O'Connell as a consultant for 161 T-Ticket Path. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved.
Move to adjourn.
Can we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, there's a motion to adjourn on the table. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Unanimous, so moved.